Fayed and Princess Diana are all French, and of course France does have privacy laws in place, although of course in this case they don't appear to have prevented this sort of confrontation.
In terms of protocol, Adam, what would happen now? There will be a period of mourning and then some kind of national occasion for the funeral? Well,
frankly, it's a very awkward situation as well as a horrific one, because of course Princess Diana is no longer an official member of the royal family. She's no longer a royal highness. She's no longer, for example, prayed for in the national prayers of the Church of England. Only Prince Charles is prayed for, so that whatever is done will have to be done spontaneously, if you like, and of course everything will have to pass through the protocol of Buckingham Palace. I imagine mourning will be more private than public, because, as I say, Princess Diana is not one of the official royal family on a list for which there are preordained periods of mourning and processes of mourning.
No doubt, though, there are some procedures which the Prime Minister has within his say-so to enact as he sees fit.
I imagine so. I think it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that there could be some official, not necessarily a recall of Parliament, but some official process set up whereby the political leaders of the country can all have their say on this particular matter and express the condolences of the nation. Of course, when there is a funeral or a memorial service, it will be attended undoubtedly by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition and others. At this stage, though, of course, the expression is one of shock. At the same time, it has been noticeable in political reaction that as far as the question of Princess Diana's relationship with the press is concerned, there is a realization that the Princess, on occasions, certainly cooperated very much with publicity. So I don't think politicians will necessarily, or the more senior, more thoughtful politicians will necessarily be totally quick to condemn, certainly the British press, for what's happened.
Despite the difficulties in the relationship,
Drop of lessening respect for the House of Windsor as a whole. The British people have been, for the first time, questioning, it's putting it too high to say the need for a royal family, but certainly questioning the outlays. There have been at least token gestures at saving money on the part of the royal family, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, the Queen has gone a long way to try to patch up what has become a very bad image. This past summer, Brian, there were polls that were released that showed for the first time ever less than 50% of the people in Britain wanted the monarchy. That was a shocking revelation when the numbers, say, 20 years ago were 80%. But the Queen has gone around a lot to try to patch up the relationship. She pays taxes now for the first time ever, the first monarch to do so. She reduced the number of people in the royal family who received public stipends for their public works. She opened Buckingham Palace up to tourists to try to raise money to support the palaces, so that the public wouldn't have to pay for it. She's trying to do her bit. I'll be interested to see the reaction to royalty and monarchy after this tragedy. It may bring people back to the monarchy in a sense that they'll say, we've lost something and we didn't realize how precious it was until we lost it.
I'm reading from the newswires. A close friend of Dodi Fayed says Fayed's romance with Princess Diana appeared serious, and the millionaire playboy was pleased with the public attention surrounding their relationship. Writer Jack Martin says Fayed was fabulously wealthy but wanted fame, and he said, quote, "He died with the most famous woman in the world. He couldn't have scripted it better. It is the great romantic tragedy of the 20th century." Well, we'll see about that. Said Martin, it was as if he was settling into a real relationship. I heard about so many girls over the years, but this was different. And the article ends with Princess Diana and Fayed were killed early Saturday in a car crash in Paris. Keith Miller, stay with us. We're going to move on to someone who's been patient enough to stay on the phone with us from France for a long time now, and I apologize for that. Elaine Lipworth is a royal historian and someone who has spent much time not only with the princess but studying and writing about the princess. And Elaine, thank you for coming on the air tonight, and I would begin by asking for your reaction and how you learned the news.
Well, I learned the news, like most people here, from friends, from people in Britain calling, and it's so sad that it's very difficult to remain detached, to have any kind of journalistic objectivity, because for me personally and to most people in Britain who I know, she was a gentle, delightful woman who was really the only star of the royal family, and it's an enormous shock to everybody in Britain who I've been talking to and here in France. I mean, just stunning, as you've been finding out from everybody. I mean, she was, I think her importance and her significance will remain for many, many years to come, not only for her role in the royal family and for her charisma and the way she, well, obviously filled the pages of newspapers and magazines around the world, but also for her significance, especially recently, as somebody who had the power to change hearts and minds and opinion all over the world in terms of really important issues like the banning of landmines.
That seemed to be a recent calling of hers. We're, as you speak, looking at pictures of her arrival in Bosnia. And where did this come from as a cause, as a crusade for her? Because she clearly embraced it and clearly brought worldwide attention to it.
It came from her friendship with various people in the Red Cross and from a real, more than determination, but something inside her that made her follow this path and really wanting to become a humanitarian, somebody who could particularly help children. And I think when she went to Angola in January, something happened to her that brought her to really took her to a different level within herself, when she realized how her own power, her own fame, and her own personal touch could have an enormous impact on the lives of ordinary people. And I think for the first time, she put her own interests behind her own problems, and any kind of petty or not so petty worries that everybody goes through, and really decided to devote an enormous part of her life to making a real difference in the world. And it was, as you say, a calling.
When you we're looking at pictures now of the fabulously extravagant wedding, her train trailing her after the ceremony by what seems like 100 yards, and then later the very, very glamorous Diana. She must have been aware early on, and she's written as much with the help of others. The glare in this country.
It certainly wasn't apparent to her at the very beginning. I mean, I've been following the story of Princess Diana since 1981, and she was obviously a completely different person. I mean, as anybody would be as a teenager still, but she wasn't aware of the impact on her own life. She wasn't aware what it would mean being in the microscope, and she certainly had no idea about what it would be to become the world's biggest media star. You know, when you think that, forget any film stars, Princess Diana was more beloved and more photographed than simply anybody else in the whole world. And that's why I think that in the next few days we will see some kind of state funeral and real public recognition from the royal family of the positive, the good that she did. You know, they will put aside all the differences, all the problems that they had with the Princess of Wales, and I think focus on her goodness. And they will have to appreciate that everybody, or at least most people in Britain, do regard her as a member almost of their own family. And certainly members of my family and everybody I know in Britain are all mourning today.
As we look at pictures that have just come to us of people laying flowers at Kensington Palace, it makes you think about the loss she has suffered, not perhaps in stature, but perhaps in title, perhaps in the accoutrements that come with the marriage she had that's now no more. And how did that affect her, if at all, or did it have a freeing effect?
I think it was very mixed. It did have some kind of liberating effect, but not enough, of course, sadly, tragically. I mean, she went to Paris, for instance, spent a lot of time in Paris, not only because she was with Dodi, but because the privacy laws are more stringent there, and because she felt that she would be able to escape the glare of the world's press and paparazzi, and of course she wasn't able to. And so I think that her separation to some degree from the royal family, the loss of her HRH, her Royal Highness title, was a mixed blessing, because on the one hand, no, she wasn't an integral, official member of the royal family anymore. On the other hand, of course, she was still the mother of the future King of Great Britain, and in everybody's mind, and certainly the press, the tabloids, and everybody, all of us who want to read them, and see pictures of her on TV, she was still the most interesting person in the royal family. She was still the glittering star of the royal family. So it's almost impossible to assess the impact of this on the people of Britain and, of course, her sons.
We're just seeing from Paris, as we look at pictures of Prince Charles and William and Harry. Heart surgeons fought for hours to save Diana. This is tough to listen to, but it's part of what's going to be the story. They evidently fought valiantly for a long, long time. We're going to look at God Save the Queen being played now.
Live from the news leader in Northern California, News Center 4.
And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends.
The life of Britain's fairy tale princess comes to a tragic end. Diana, Princess of Wales, dead tonight after a car accident in Paris. Good evening, everybody. I'm James Hattori.
And I'm Catherine Heenan, and we are continuing with our coverage of the accident tonight, which killed Princess Diana of Wales. It is now a world without Princess Diana, very hard to imagine. She was arguably the best known, the most watched, most photographed woman in the world. Her storybook marriage ended in divorce, shaking the royal family and the world. And tonight, people around the globe are mourning the loss of a princess who some say had just about everything but happiness. In England right now, it is about 7 in the morning. People just waking up, just beginning to hear the news of what happened. It is going to be a shock to everyone, as it has been throughout the world. Team coverage begins tonight in London with Charles Sabine.
Good morning from London, and good morning from a London where behind me a grey dawn is starting to emerge. A dawn on which the British people are coming to terms with the fact that the Diana, Princess of Wales, is dead. Probably the most momentous single death in anyone's lifetime who is alive right now in the United Kingdom. It will take many days, if not weeks, for the British people to come to terms with this news. The news that she died of injuries that were received during a car crash last night in Paris, in which her friend Dodi Fayed and their driver were also killed and one other person injured. It would appear that the tragic events of last night were precipitated after a chase by several motorcycles which contained paparazzi and which ended so tragically in a car crashing in a tunnel underneath the Seine River in Paris. And the news with which all of the United Kingdom and the rest of the world is waking up this morning is that Diana, Princess of Wales, is dead.
And that is Charles Sabine in London. Thank you, Charles. Diana died at about 4 a.m. Paris time, 8 o'clock here tonight on the West Coast. She suffered a lung hemorrhage caused, of course, by the severe wounds from the accident, a wound to the left pulmonary vein. And again, her death has left people shocked. Diana, Dodi Al-Fayed, and 2 bodyguards were driving about midnight in a tunnel in Paris along the Seine River. Paris police say they were indeed being chased by paparazzi on motorcycles after them for photos, as they often were during the short relationship.
The gentleman who was taking pictures was there immediately following the accident. Before I could run from the mouth of the tunnel, 50 yards approximately to the 30 yards from the car, he was already...
You're saying within seconds of the crash?
Within seconds. And his camera equipment was far too sophisticated for a tourist or someone not professional, I assumed, associated with the press.
The front of the car completely smashed.
The accident we just came upon, and you see a car, an accident, it's serious, and you pause, and the next thing you know, that people have died, and we find out that the Princess Diana is in the car, and we were shocked when we got back to the hotel to find out that we just witnessed that scene.
Shortly after the crash, it was reported that Dodi and one of the bodyguards had died. Diana was rushed to a Paris hospital. There were conflicting reports about her condition, details very sketchy. There were reports of a concussion, arm and thigh injuries, but then, later, reports from the hospital confirmed by Buckingham Palace that Diana had died.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy. The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends, and with the family and friends of the others who died in the accident. The Queen and the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister have been informed of the accident and of the death of the Princess of Wales.
You don't have to be a British citizen to feel a sense of loss tonight. Princess Diana was a celebrity known and admired around the world, especially for her charity fundraising. She was the subject of so much attention, so much adoration, including here in the Bay Area. Nightbeat's Claudia Cowan joins us now live from San Francisco with more on that. Claudia?
Right, James. San Franciscans are indeed mourning the untimely death of Princess Diana. And as you might imagine, people who are here from England are simply in a state of shock. Tonight they gathered at restaurants and pubs to watch the news together, but many still can't believe it. At British pubs like the Pig and Whistle, patrons were glued to TVs that carried the latest news of the tragic accident that took Diana's life. Many were in shock as they watched reports detailing the life and death of the Princess of Wales.
She's carried the royal family through a lot of turbulent times, and just to hear it on the news now.
Was the most photographed person in the world, and just as she was redefining her life after divorce, it ended. Here's ABC's Beth Nissen with a look back.
The willowy young woman born as Lady Diana Spencer was the focus of world attention for 16 years, beginning with her storybook wedding to Prince Charles in July of 1981, a ceremony watched on television by an estimated 750 million people worldwide. Within a year, Diana had given birth to Prince William, heir to the throne of England. A second son, Harry, was born 2 years later in 1984. The woman, by then known as Princess Di, devoted herself to raising her sons, raising funds for charities, raising public awareness of AIDS. By the early 1990s, the palace was besieged by regular reports of marital arguments and extramarital affairs on both sides.
My husband and I had to keep everything together because we didn't want to disappoint the public. And yet, obviously, there was a lot of anxiety going on within our four walls.
In late 1992, the royal couple officially separated. They were divorced last year. Since then, Diana has tried to build a role for herself as a global goodwill ambassador, using her celebrity to bring attention to the damage done by landmines and to the ravages of war in Bosnia. But her personal life always seemed to draw larger headlines than her charity work. Most recently, her reported romance with Harrods department store heir Dodi Al-Fayed. A photograph of the two kissing was splashed on front pages throughout Britain. Beth Nissen, ABC News, New York.
And tonight, the world mourns the loss of a woman who captured our attention and our hearts. A private person who lived her life quite publicly, Princess Diana, mother of two. She was 36 years old.
Are you ready for Chevy's biggest model year-end clearance ever? It's Chevrolet.
On opposing teams. Fayed, considered a playboy, was married once before in 1994. It lasted just 8 months. He was a millionaire many times over, with homes in London, New York, Switzerland, and Los Angeles.
Diana was a real-life princess who lived a fairy tale life, but with a very tragic ending. CNN's Tim Lister has a look at the life of the Princess of Wales.
It was the wedding of the century. A marriage that captivated not just the people of Britain, but the world. On a summer's day in 1981, Lady Diana Spencer married the Prince of Wales amid the splendor of St. Paul's Cathedral. She was young, diffident, and uncertain, not used to the formality and rules that governed the House of Windsor, and not used to the unrelenting media spotlight that would become part of her daily existence. The expectation was that she and Prince Charles would continue the line of succession, providing at least one heir who would assume the throne in the 21st century. And just a year after the marriage, their first son, Prince William, was born, soon to be followed by another son, Harry. Everything seemed to be going according to the script carefully prepared by Buckingham Palace. But Diana was depressed by her frequent separations from Prince Charles and by what she perceived as his excessive devotion to royal duty. She hated being away from her sons and was both hurt and angered by constant speculation about her husband's alleged relationships with other women. She spoke later of Lady Camilla Bowles, a longtime friend of Charles, as being the third person in her marriage. For his part, Prince Charles appeared to resent her immense popularity with the public, which stole the limelight from him, and his interests, the countryside, ecology, fishing and hunting, were incompatible with hers, music, fashion. Amid intense media attention, it became clear that Princess Diana and Prince Charles were growing apart. The newspapers would measure the days they spent separated. A book, Diana, Her Story, by Andrew Morton, revealed details of her unhappiness. She had developed eating disorders and was even reported to have attempted suicide. Eventually, but out of the blue, the then British Prime Minister John Major announced that Diana and Charles would separate. The British monarchy had not faced such a crisis since the abdication of King Edward VIII in 1936. But the princess was not to be deterred from maintaining her high public profile. Once the couple's divorce was confirmed and freed from the shackles of royal protocol, she began to be seen in public with other men. She focused her official life on several charities, as varied as the Royal Ballet in London and the Red Cross campaign against the landmines. Within the past few months, she's been in Angola and Bosnia to see at first hand the effects of landmines as a guest of the International Red Cross, a stand that courted political controversy. She managed to combine her charitable work with a high-profile social calendar. But it was her liaison with Dodi Al-Fayed that had seemed to be the most serious since the breakup of her marriage. Tim Lister reporting.
A quick recap now of our top story. Britons at this hour are waking up to the tragic news. Princess Diana pronounced dead about 5 hours after a car crash in Paris. Her companion, Egyptian film producer Dodi Fayed, also killed, along with a chauffeur. There are reports their car was being chased by paparazzi photographers right before the fatal crash.
And when we come back, we will continue our coverage of the death of the Princess of Wales. We'll be back after this.
As a guest of the International Red Cross, a stand that courted political controversy. She managed to combine her charitable work with a high-profile social calendar. But it was her liaison with Dodi Al-Fayed that had seemed to be the most serious since the breakup of her marriage. Tim Lister reporting.
Funeral arrangements are not complete, but palace observers say it's likely Diana will be honored with a royal funeral and buried near Windsor Castle. We'll be right back.
an international jet-setter, is reported to be a multimillionaire himself. He produced such films as the Academy Award winner Chariots of Fire.
It's hard. Requires concentration of will, energy of soul.
The World According to Garp, and the FX movie.
Out of maybe 100 writers, Bill Condon came up with a great idea for this, for FX2, and which everybody liked.
Fayed had homes in New York, London, Paris, Los Angeles, and Switzerland. He's dated a number of celebrities, including Brooke Shields and Britt Eklund. Like Diana, he's been married once and divorced. One of his former girlfriends, Kelly Fisher, says she was engaged to marry Fayed. She told CNN's Larry King that Fayed left her, as she put it, for a bigger fish.
I feel that Dodi is just really in love with the media attention and being with Princess Diana, and I think that's the bottom line with him. They love it, the Fayeds. They love it.
Fayed and Princess Diana are said to have met about 10 years ago when he played polo against her former husband, Prince Charles. Earlier this month, British newspapers were awash with speculation about the romantic future of Fayed and Princess Diana after photos were published that showed them embracing. The photos were the first evidence of a relationship between Diana and another man since she and Prince Charles were divorced in August of last year. One London tabloid speculated that Fayed and the princess would announce their engagement in September. Porter Anderson, CNN reporting.
One of the questions that is certain to come up again and again in the days that are ahead, and that is the question of the press and the royal family, the press and Princess Diana specifically. The press, she said, had hounded her. It was unbearable, in her words, to try to deal with it. She specifically named the British press, but the situation, even last night in Paris at about midnight when photographers were pursuing her car, showed the type of life that she had as a result of almost incessant media attention. That media attention had really been brought to the fore, of course, with this relationship 1 year after her divorce from Prince Charles, her relationship with Dodi Al-Fayed, fueling all kinds of speculation that even a marriage might be in the offing. I want to bring in Andrew Roberts of the Sunday Times in our London bureau once again. Andrew knew Princess Diana. How much was she troubled by the press? She was very aware of the fact that she was a celebrity, that people wanted to see her, but did she feel that it had just become too unreasonable?
Oh, absolutely, yes. They wanted to see her, but not on her terms. She, you know, we've got laws in this country to stop people stalking, but we don't have a law to stop people from shoving camera lenses into your life constantly. I mean, the fact that we're hearing that a man actually took photographs of her dying in the car shows what scum these people are and how far they will actually just go.
What kind of a debate is there going to be? Will it be much of a debate, really?
There will be, I think, because the Labour Party, which has won the British general elections a couple of months ago, have spoken out in favour of a privacy, some form of privacy law. And if we had the same type of privacy law as they have, say, in France, then Princess Diana would probably be alive today. But we don't, and you're able to do absolutely anything. And she has been hounded literally to death.
Has her life been put in danger in the past? Have there been previous incidents where the press, by their actions, photographers, by their actions, physically put her life in danger, or other members of the royal family?
Well, they're constantly getting in the way of cars. You know, it's almost impossible sometimes to drive out of Kensington Palace, where she lives, for all the photographers that just fling themselves in the way of the car. But, of course, that would only harm them unless, as we've just seen, you know, the driver is in some way put off and the car crashes. So yes, no, I mean it's a risk that she's had to live with, as well as obviously the normal risks of being assassinated. She survived an assassination attempt with Prince Charles that the IRA made on her in the mid-1980s. So she's lived with the possibility of sudden death all her life.
Princess Diana had made in the past efforts to try to satisfy the press, to try to satisfy their desires for photo opportunities, to make herself available. It didn't work. Why?
She went out of her way to do that. in order to ensure that the things she was working for, one thinks, of course, of the cancer charity that she sold her dresses for recently, got the maximum amount of publicity and therefore the maximum amount of money for the causes she believed in. But the press just totally ignored any attempted deal. They would take that advantage of the the photo opportunity, and then they would go on and continue hounding her. It's impossible, really, to think of a way out of this without having a law, in the same way as we have a law against sexual stalkers.
Peace and happiness proved too elusive for the woman who died at 36 and was once the major player in a fairy tale. Stan Bernard, NBC News.
We are now going to go to a live picture of Prince Charles, who is leaving the hospital. He arrived in Paris to pick up the remains of his ex-wife and will be traveling back to London, scheduled to depart at 12:20, headed back to bring the body back to London. We'll be bringing you that coverage, of course, throughout the day, and we will have more of that as the situation warrants. What we want to do now is go to Martha's Vineyards with NBC's Claire Shipman, who is with the president on his vacation. And of course, he came out this morning, Claire, and gave a brief statement. Why don't you tell us where he is and what he has said?
Well, that's right. Ed, news of the princess's death, as you can imagine, was greeted with great shock and sadness by the first family here on Martha's Vineyard. They were told late last night. They immediately left the party they were attending, and this morning the president had this to say.
Let me say again how very sad Hillary and I are about the terrible accident that has taken the life of Princess Diana and the others who were with her. We liked her very much. We admired her work for children, for people with AIDS, for the cause of ending the scourge of landmines in the world, and for her love for her children, William and Harry. And I know that this is a very difficult time for millions of people in the United Kingdom who are deeply shocked and grieving. And the American people send their condolences to all of them, and we value their friendship, and we understand this great and painful experience. For myself, I will always be glad that I knew the princess, and always think of her in very strong and positive terms, as will Hillary. And we can only hope that her work will go forward, and that everyone who can will support her two fine sons and help them to have the life and the future that she would want.
I think you can see a great sense of personal sadness on the part of the president. We're told he's sending condolence letters to the royal family and to Tony Blair. Ed?
Claire, I know one of the people who always admired the princess was the First Lady. Where was she during this?
Well, we were told that she was there but remained in her vehicle, and as for what they're doing the rest of the day, we're not clear. The First Family did go to church immediately after the president's statement.
All right, Claire Shipman, thanks very much. We appreciate it for the latest there. Now what we want to do is go to NBC's Richard Roth, who is outside of the hospital. He is joining us with the latest as relates to what is going on, as we showed you pictures earlier of Prince Charles departing the hospital as he was headed back to what we know will be the airport to bring the body to London. And I think that Richard is outside of the hospital now and ready. Richard?
Yes, Brian.
It's Ed, yeah. We gave Brian a reprieve.
As you may have seen just a few moments ago, the convoy of vehicles, including what looked to me to be a steel gray minivan, a regular passenger van with the rear seats apparently removed. Inside it was the coffin carrying the body of Princess Diana.
For a second, we are showing live pictures of the coffin now being placed in the vehicle that will obviously take the princess's remains to the airport. All right, now we're at taped piece. Prince Charles and I believe that's Jacques Chirac meeting with him, or at least at the house or the hospital there. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Richard, we interrupted you.
They were
They were in the hospital for all of about 30 minutes. Prince Charles had met the French president outside the hospital at the rear entrance of the hospital. They were inside for between 20 and 30 minutes at all, and then the convoy of vehicles, the passenger van carrying the coffin containing the body of Princess Diana, followed immediately by the Jaguar flying the Union Jack with Prince Charles inside, speeding away to go the 10 miles or so to a military airport, from where the coffin and the prince and two of Princess Diana's sisters will take it back to London.
Richard, could you give us an idea of the mood outside of the hospital? Many people are likening this to a situation in this country, for instance, when President Kennedy was killed, or Martin Luther King, the same somber mourning tone.
Well, I don't think we've seen that same level of outpouring of grief. There's in the crowd here at the hospital, there's clearly been a mixture of curiosity and sadness. And I must say, and I don't have an explanation for this, but the odd thing was, as the convoy of vehicles passed by, there was applause in the crowd. There was hardly a murmur, but just spontaneously people broke into applause as it went by. People have been very quiet here. They've been waiting to see the arrival of Prince Charles, and now that he's left, the crowd is mostly beginning to disperse.
All right, Richard, thank you very much for the update there, and we will continue to come back as it warrants. Thank you very much. Obviously, what we're going to do throughout the day is bring you
impressed again by her work, her charitable work while she was princess, and even afterwards as a private citizen. And of course the president too talked of her sons. Last night he said he particularly expressed some profound sadness, and he said thoughts and prayers are going out especially to the children. Frank?
Eileen O'Connor, Martha's Vineyard. Well, when we come back, Princess Diana, who was she, what she stood for, and why she intrigued us all. Bureau Chief of the Guardian newspaper. Martin, thanks again for coming in, admittedly on such tragic and unexpected circumstances. Lord Archer, to you first. You knew the princess. What kind of person was she, many will be asking today, and what, in fact, after all the celebrity and the hounding is stripped away, what, in fact, did she stand for?
Well, I think you will see two things that will last a lot longer than even her lifetime. Namely, one, her very, very dedicated attitude towards humanitarian causes. She supported the AIDS campaign when it was not fashionable. She pressed very hard on the landmines campaign when not many people were listening. And on top of that, she had this immense gift, when it came to charities, of being able to fill a room both with happiness and with an awful lot of money for whichever charity it was that she was supporting. A great gift. We have a function in theory in a few days' time on October the 9th, which was another Red Cross function at which I would have been doing the auction. You can always guarantee when she's there that you'd raise £100,000, about $160,000, $170,000, if she was present. There is literally no one else on earth you could guarantee that with. And so by her presence, just being there, made an immense amount of difference to many, many worthy causes. She was quite unquestionably the brightest star in our constellation, and she will not be replaced.
Lord Archer, let me jump in here. I'd like to show you and our viewers some tape that we've gotten recently in the last few minutes of Princess Diana's casket coming out of the hospital and being loaded into the hearse. Lord Archer, your thoughts upon seeing those pictures?
No, terrible. I mean, when I was woken this morning at about 5 o'clock to be told she was dead, I didn't actually believe it. I woke my wife and told her, and her reaction was much like mine, immense sadness for the two children, Prince William and Prince Harry, because, of course, we have lost a superstar, we have lost a world figure, they have lost the mother. And there is no one, whatever they thought of Princess Diana, will doubt her absolute devotion to those two children and her determination that when Prince William takes the throne, he will have seen many aspects of life because of the tremendous contact she had across the world. She felt very, very desperately about the way the children were brought up and the role Prince William would in time play as our monarch.
Martin Walker.
Well, I think Lord Archer's right in the way she'll be remembered, but of course there's a historical role that she's played, and she has been part of a tragic love story, which may at some point yet bring to an end well over 1,000 years of British monarchy. The royal family has been in crisis, and that crisis has been particularly acute because of the appalling way the soap opera drama of Charles and Di has played out. It began with such high hopes, such a fairy tale wedding, perhaps the first royal wedding, the first example of such pageantry ever seen around the world on global television. And so everybody was involved in this story. And then we realized that there was no love there at all. Prince Charles has said he never loved her. They end in divorce, they end in suicide attempts, in bulimia, in real tragedy. And I think that the real question now for the British royal family is that they're at a crossroads. Can they somehow embrace the memory of Di and her popularity and find some new lease of life, or are they going to somehow see that this most popular single member of the royal family, now that she's gone, weakens their position even further?
And the end of the monarchy?
My own guess is that there'll be such an outpouring of public grief in Britain over this, because she was so popular, that if the royal family play this right, they could ensure at least another generation, because very few of us in England would want to deny the children, the sons of Di, their inheritance.
We're going to take a quick break. We will talk more with Martin Walker and Lord Archer and take your calls from around the world on this sad story today, right after this message.
And raged when they followed the kids in Central Park and knocked John off his bicycle. So she went to court. She went to court and got this one particular wasp that kept hovering around her and got a court order restricting him from going near her. So maybe perhaps that's what Diana should have done.
Well, actually, she did do that with one, I believe, Tish. She got a court order against one, but it didn't help her in the long run with that great crew.
Ladies, let me do this. Let me interrupt you, beg your indulgence to stay with us over this commercial break. We're going to take a quick break and then come back with our continuing coverage, The Death of a Princess. Back.
Millions of people who want to pass their respects to the late Diana, Princess of Wales.
Charles, we are looking at now a picture of the coffin being put in the vehicle that will transport her remains to the airport, and it is draped with the flag of the House of Windsor. I'm wondering if that gives us any indication by means of the flag being there in the sense that the palace and the royal family may indeed say we're going to have to do certain things here because of the love of this woman, or for this woman.
Yes, Ed, every indication that we've had today is that the royal family is coming together again over this, that they are wanting bygones to be bygones, whatever differences there have been in the past between Diana, Charles and the rest of the family. They seem to be putting well into the past now, and the family is certainly seeming to rally around now, especially because, of course, of the thoughts about the princes Harry and William and their feelings in this whole affair.
Charles, we're looking at pictures of mourners there in London. One woman had a plate of the prince and princess, and she was grieving. And now we have a sight of people laying flowers in Washington, I'm told, Washington, D.C. But I'm wondering if you can give us an idea, as you've been out throughout the evening and this morning, and I know you've been talking to people, just the mood of those who are coming to pay their respects. Obviously shock, but what else are you hearing outside of that?
Well, the one thing that one has heard particularly today is how people feel that Diana was the princess of the people. They feel very much that she was the one member of the royal family with whom they could relate, that she concerned herself with matters that they were interested in, that they felt were issues that should be attended to, and that in many ways the fact that she was the one member of the family who allowed herself to open up to emotion and to show herself to be someone who had the same feelings, the same needs as ordinary people, has ingratiated herself to the British people more than perhaps any other member of the royal family since the war.
And Charles, finally, we were on the websites, and obviously these were up prior to the tragic death of the princess, but she was so beloved that it was almost like a rock star or a movie star. They had things like her favorite food and her favorite movies and things like that. There was that relationship between the princess and people.
Yes, it is impossible to overstate, really, the sense of grief that you're really touching on there. A lot of people have talked about comparisons with when President Kennedy was assassinated in the United States, or when Princess Grace died in Monte Carlo. This, I think, goes even beyond those tragic events for the British people. It really is impossible to really, as I say, overstate just how much the grief is being felt in this country today.
All right, Charles Sabine, thank you for the update. We will, of course, come back to you throughout the day. We appreciate it. Okay. What we want to do now is turn back to our guest in Washington, D.C., Letitia Baldridge, a leading manners expert and former social secretary for Jackie Kennedy, and British social historian Virginia Newmeyer is also with us. Both ladies join us from Washington, D.C. And Ms. Newmeyer, may I ask you the same thing I asked Charles Sabine, the idea that the House of Windsor flag draped the coffin as we saw it being put into the vehicle that would take the remains back to the airport. Do you think that is indeed a sign to say that the royal family is going to indeed, as Charles suggested, have some type of quote-unquote state part, official part to the funeral?
It certainly bears out what I said earlier, that they will try as hard as possible to co-opt her fame and popularity by having something that is as close to a state funeral as possible. In addition, one of the things, while we're talking about her popularity, that we should remember is that she is the mother of the future King of England, and as such deserves all of the respect that she can possibly glean from the royal family. The royal family has to be very, very conscious of William's feelings and of Harry's feelings, and in this sense, they really want to do for her whatever will help the boys. And as every grief counselor in the world knows, it is important to be able to say goodbye in a formal, structured way. Yeah. And I think that such a funeral would really help the boys enormously.
And Ms. Baldridge, as you could attest to with the Kennedy children, it is important to keep their wherewithal, their future, and their lives crystal clear in this picture, is it not?
Absolutely, and keep the flame alive. I think we mustn't forget that she was a marvelous mentor for young women. Mothers all over the world said, straighten up, walk like Diana does. And she was always meticulously dressed, beautifully groomed, and we're in an age of slobbery and people dressing down and looking simply ghastly. She always looked like $1 million.
No.
She had a beautiful voice. People talked about her voice. She had lovely manners. So that is something we're going to miss terribly in this world without her.
Ms. Newmeyer, what about the awkward situation for Prince Charles at this point because of the personal side that everyone knew and almost lived out, if you will?
Well, it is, as you say, an awkward situation. The problem is, of course, his romance with Camilla Parker Bowles. Before Diana's horrible death, the prince was certainly trying to go forward as quickly as possible with his plans to marry Camilla Parker Bowles, whether morganatically, in which case she would not have been his queen exactly, or just to make her his queen. Now, of course, those plans have had to be put on hold because the royal family certainly cannot be seen to be profiting from Diana's death. On the other hand, it certainly is, without being rude or insensitive, I think I must point out as a historian that her death eventually will end up being something of a convenience for them because she has been a thorn in the side of the royal family because of her personality. And I think, in a way, also, this near-state funeral that I think is being planned will perhaps make up for some of their cruelty and stinginess to her during the separation, and their stinginess in terms of the money that she was awarded, and their general standoffishness to her.
Ms. Baldridge, as relates to that, what would you, just as a person who understands the idea of manners and how society plays into these things, what would be your advice with this particular prickly situation?
Well, it is prickly, but I think they can let bygones be bygones now. She is gone to her heavenly rest, and they don't have to worry about any scandals with Dodi Fayed. And it's so ironic, the irony of it, with this auction of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor's accoutrements from their house in Paris, which Mohammed Fayed is selling all those things. And he was looking forward to becoming the grandfather-in-law of the future King of England. The irony in this whole situation between the Fayed family, Princess Diana, and Dodi Fayed is not to be missed.
Do we also miss the fact in all of this and all of our want to know what happens in people's lives, that these are human beings with lives that they want to lead, and though many of them enjoy the attention, that perhaps those of us who want to follow it and perhaps live vicariously should maybe take a step back and look at what we're doing as well?
Well, you know, one of the things that strikes me is that very, very little has been said about Dodi al-Fayed or his father, Mohammed al-Fayed, and how much he must be grieving and mourning. Of course, it's quite natural that the majority of the attention should be focused on the Princess of Wales, but there is another family involved in this, and very, very little has been said.
Actually, three other families involved.
Well,
in this
three other families, of course, but the other is well known. Perhaps if they're really willing to let bygones be bygones and, you know, de mortuis nil nisi bonum, say only good of the dead, perhaps this is an opportunity for Mr. al-Fayed finally to become a British subject. Who knows?
Yes, it would be good. It would be good, and I bet you that the embassies around the world, the British embassies, will open up their books of condolence for people to come and sign. That's one way in which the public can go and show their reverence for her by signing the book, and these names and signatures get sent back to England as a permanent record.
All right, ladies, I have to take a break here. I thank you both for lending your expertise and also your comments on what is a trying time on both sides of the water. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here. We'll return with our continuing coverage, the death of a princess, Princess Diana. Back in a moment.
As the princess could be left alone when she came to Washington. She was last in this area in June when she did a benefit with the Red Cross with Elizabeth Dole to raise money for one of the causes that she had so passionately embraced, and that is trying to help victims of landmines. Of course, in recent months, she visited Bosnia and Angola to raise money. This event in Washington, she raised some $650,000 to help victims of landmines. Another thing, Ed, as you well know, Washington is a tough town, but very, very rarely, if ever, did you see any kind of critical words in the press on Princess Diana.
Yeah, that's very true, Andrea. There was a woman who just walked by you, and she clearly looked, quite frankly, grief-stricken. And I'm wondering if, with those of the people that you've had an opportunity to talk to, if it has set in this morning. So many people that I talked to last night were just in total shock, almost disbelief that this could happen. I'm wondering what you're hearing today.
There are people in various stages, Ed, depending on when they did hear the news. In fact, as a journalist here, you feel somewhat guilty because I know we are keeping some people from visiting these steps because there, at different times throughout the day, have been as many as about a dozen cameras here, and I think there are people who are understandably reluctant to share their private grief in such a public way because there's virtually no choice to lay their flowers and messages on the steps here without being confronted with media. It is heart-wrenching to look at some of the messages here. There was, among the things that really touched me this morning, was a poem from a little girl talking about her admiration of the princess. There was someone who had pulled a card from a deck of cards and placed it on the steps, and it was the Queen of Hearts. There are other messages that say simply, "We loved you, Diana, we'll miss you." There are also several cards and letters that have been left for Princes William and Harry, of course, the two children of Princess Diana, whom she was very protective of.
Yeah, all right. NBC's Andrea McCarran outside of the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Andrea, for that report. We appreciate it. What we want to do now is we're going to take a quick break, and we'll return with our continuing coverage on the death of Princess Diana. Back in a moment.
And then was gone, too soon.
A storybook beginning, but a Shakespearean end.
Well, I suppose had we known it wasn't even really a storybook beginning, they were mismatched. She liked to frolic. He'd never been allowed to.
Strikes me, too, that the role that she and the royals played is something that we still have trouble getting our arms around. What is it that they do? What is it that causes that magic?
Well, what they're supposed to do, I guess, is be a symbol to the country and to the world. And Charles was brought up that way, stern father, not a lot of larking around in his life. And she liked to have a good time. She liked to have friends.
Normal. Bruce Morton, thanks very much. That is it for this late edition. Tune in to CNN throughout the day for continued coverage of the death of Princess Diana, including a special edition of CNN's Impact at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Remember, Prince Charles is going to be accompanying the body back to Britain at this hour. Get the latest information online.
The American people send their condolences to all of them. And we value their friendship, and we understand this great and painful experience.
That was, of course, President Clinton grieving as much of the world is at the pain of the loss of one of the most popular women of our time. Welcome to Newsfront here on MSNBC. I'm Ed Gordon. Princess Diana died, as you know, during the night hours after a horrific car crash in Paris. We'll continue throughout the day with our in-depth look at the life and times of Britain's beloved princess, and we'll update you on the police investigation into the crash that took her life last night. You just saw President Clinton, who is vacationing on Martha's Vineyard, and we heard a statement from him that he issued earlier. What we want to do now is go to NBC's Claire Shipman, who is also with the president. Claire?
That's right. The president and Mrs. Clinton greeted this news with a great deal of shock and surprise. We're told they found out late last night. They were at a party. They left immediately. They had known the princess quite well. Both of them said had been very fond of her. The last they'd seen of her was 2 months ago at the White House. We heard a bit of what the president said this morning, and here's a little bit more now.
For myself, I will always be glad that I knew the princess, and always think of her in very strong and positive terms, as will Hillary. And we can only hope that her work will go forward, and that everyone who can will support her two fine sons and help them to have the life and the future that she would want.
Now, we're told that the president is sending letters of condolence to the royal family and to Tony Blair. And as to funeral arrangements, White House officials say they're waiting to see what arrangements are being made in Britain before any decision is made about who might attend on behalf of the United States. Ed?
Claire, of course, as a head of state, the president oftentimes has to have kind words, particularly in situations like this. But there did seem to be a genuine like for Princess Diana from both the president and the First Lady.
Indeed, and as we talked about earlier, she'd been a number of times to the White House for various charity events, to state dinners, and she had just been visiting the First Lady a couple of months ago at the White House, so they did seem to have a real bond, a real fondness for her.
Claire, any idea, and I know that, and I don't know if you've heard any whispers, particularly right now, they are very tight-lipped usually as to what happened, and you alluded to the fact that they are going to wait until they hear about plans for the funeral. But any idea if, for instance, if the president doesn't go, whether the First Lady would venture?
It's really not clear. That would obviously be an option. Very often vice presidents in these circumstances might attend, but I think they just want to wait and see what sort of funeral it's going to be before they make any decision, but they're not ruling anything out.
Yeah. Are we expected to hear from the president any more today on this situation? I know oftentimes when football season rolls around, he typically, without even something like this occurring, he typically stays away. He likes to stay in and take a look. Are we looking to hear from him later in the day?
No, we're not. We're told this would likely have been the only time we would hear from him today.
Okay, Claire Shipman on Martha's Vineyard with the President of the United States. Thanks, Claire. Appreciate it.
Sure.
We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue our coverage, our continuing coverage on the life and times of Princess Diana, the Princess of Wales. We'll be back in just a moment. You're watching MSNBC.
And sensitivity, which sometimes caused certain problems in her life.
People like the princess live a very difficult life, Hugh, as you know. She is supposed to be a symbol to her country. Was she able to live up to that?
Oh, I think so very much. And I think it is probably true that in England recently, certainly because we have, as you know, such a very large press, we have so many newspapers all turning in on each other, that every time she's tried to do something good, they've always managed to somehow cook up some controversy about it. But I don't think that that's been the case as far as the rest of the world is concerned. And in fact, whenever I've travelled abroad, I've always found that she was held in much higher esteem, I think, than in this country. Which is not to say that most people in this country didn't love her very much. They really genuinely did.
Why do you think that is? Why did the rest of the world feel one way toward her and the people of Britain feel another?
Well, it's partly a prophet is not without honour, save in his own country. And it's partly because in recent times there was definitely what you might call a freezing out by the establishment, insomuch as that she lost her power base, if you like, by the divorce and estrangement from the Prince of Wales. And of course the establishment always will stay behind the more powerful figure. And then of course, in a sense, therefore, she veered more towards charitable works, humanitarian causes, and to some extent the more sort of starry, media-orientated aspects of life.
Hugh, as we speak, there is not only a lot of sadness about what happened, but there is also apparently an awful lot of anger. Anger at the paparazzi who, according to reports, were chasing the car. But there has also been some misgivings about why, even with that chase, someone had to drive so fast in such dangerous conditions.
Well, it does ask a lot of questions, and these questions do need to be asked. Presumably, the car was trying to give the paparazzi the slip in some respect, and we will obviously know much more about what happened in the tunnel at a later date. It does seem a pity, of course, but that's partly because of her position, that if she's reverting to some extent to private life, she wouldn't have had any kind of backup escort or any kind of police protection. In fact, she has, particularly in this country, in England, she has been very, very keen in the last years, really, of her life to avoid having her own detective and her own security who might possibly have been able to fend these characters off.
Do most people think she led the fast life?
She led the fast life. She was a very glamorous figure, but she also did a lot of good for this country. That's much more what people are going to remember at the end of the day.
Royal biographer Hugh Vickers, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Alcier?
One of the many causes Princess Diana had adopted was a push to ban anti-personnel landmines around the world.
I myself and the group that work in a similar fashion to the manner in which I work, we're not official photographers, but we do not do anything unless we are officially allowed to do it. The paparazzi, the difference there is simply that the paparazzi do everything that they don't want to be allowed, they don't want to be official. They think they can get something better by, as it were, going in through the back door. And they've always acted like this. There is a difference between the English photographers and the continental ones, in that, I think there is anyway, in that English photographers, English paparazzi that is, they tend to want both worlds. They want to be both the paparazzi, in other words, go in through the back door and get a better picture, but they also want to be part of the official setup. The continental paparazzi tend to be think of being a paparazzi as being a profession. They don't want to be part of the official scene particularly. I mean, the reason that photographers want to be part of the official scene as well as take paparazzi type material is simply that they don't want to miss out on anything. And I think the biggest problem is this attitude towards the fact that the paparazzi thinks he can get something better by going in through the back door.
Yeah.
John
Shelley, let me ask you this. We heard from the princess's brother, Charles, who suggested that those who take these pictures and the editors who demand them have blood on their hands. There are others who have suggested today those who buy the tabloids and watch the tabloid-type television programs and share in the blame, because if the want wasn't there, the photographers would not be there. Where do you see that?
Well, I don't think this attitude that the market justifies the paparazzi work is to me, is absolute rubbish. I don't see it at all. You could say there's a market out there for pornography, for instance, therefore it's justified. To me, it's a nonsense. I don't think there is a market without doubt, but I don't think the market is the driving force. I think the driving force is the person that's in the middle, which is, as Diana's brother said, the people that run the tabloid newspapers and the people that buy this sort of material. And it's unfortunate that when an attempt is made to sort of sort the paparazzi out to stop him doing this, the attempt invariably makes it worse. The palace, for instance, to attempt to do this, they bring in restrictions, and they start to restrict the facility. This simply makes the paparazzi, he works harder, therefore, to get around this sort of thing. In fact, if more official facility was given, then you would have really good photographs, which I'm sure the editors would buy rather than the fuzzy sort of rubbish that very often that is produced by the paparazzi.
But how do you get an official photograph of something personal? For instance, we just showed what was labeled the kiss from, I believe it was the Monitor tabloid. That is something that would not necessarily be given official sanction.
No, I can see that point, but I mean, it depends whether you think this sort of thing should be allowed, whether whether you think access of that sort into of that sort of picture is I don't know, is just something that's whether you have any principle against it or not. The point is, for instance, years ago during Diana's the honeymoon, Prince Charles and Diana were in Balmoral just after they'd come back from their travels, and they held a photo call, and the photo call was Prince Charles with Diana, casually dressed, holding hands, and they kissed, and they did all this in front of 100 photographers that were there. And the idea of the photo call was that, and the editors in fact in London agreed to it, that they would then leave the prince and the princess alone to enjoy their honeymoon, which they did. But the point was, of course, they did also, the palace at that time sent, after the photo call, their detectives went around that particular area of Balmoral, checking on the hotels just to make sure that everybody had in fact gone home and was going to leave the thing alone. But what I'm saying is that if you give that sort of facility, and I mean, think of it, you're talking about the prince, they're holding hands, they're kissing, but it was given as a facility. Now that wipes out the paparazzi in that particular respect. And I mean, the pictures were brilliant pictures.
Yeah.
And people actually came from miles around and travelled through the night, and at least 100 photographers were there on that occasion.
All right. Well, John Shelley, thank you for coming in and sharing your thoughts on what is a question that I'm sure will be debated over the course of the next few days in particular, and perhaps from this point on. John Shelley, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break here on MSNBC. We will continue after this our continuing coverage on the life and times of Princess Diana.
When he died in 1972 and was brought back again to RAF Northolt, and the royal family went to meet it. He obviously also died in Paris, and he was also put to his grave in Windsor.
Let me make a correction. It is 20 miles northwest of London proper. It is an Air Force base that is used for prime ministers. It is also a base that is used for bringing soldiers back home, and also officially used to bring back soldiers who, of course, are killed in the line of duty. We should suggest that, of course, here is the touchdown, the arrival back home of Princess Diana, as I said to you earlier, accompanied by her ex-husband, Prince Charles, and her two sisters. And many times it's a sad moment for those who have to live through this situation. Sad in the sense of some sense of finality in the body arriving home. The Royal Honor Guard will be the official pallbearers. They will handle the coffin as it is delicately, as you might imagine, taken from the plane and then taken to the transport vehicles, and at that point taken to wherever they will start to prepare the body, I would imagine, as plans are being made for the funeral and the showing of the body, and that is something that we still do not have official details. Andrew Roberts, I know we talked about this a little earlier. Let me ask you, as relates to just your best guess in terms of a scenario of what we might see in terms of viewing and the idea of giving the world and, of course, those who live in the area an opportunity to say an official goodbye.
Well, there's a chance that she will lie in state at Westminster, the Palace of Westminster, in the Houses of Parliament, and then you have crowds walking past. This is what happened for the last king and what will probably happen for the Queen Mother. If it was chosen to do that for her, you could probably have 1 million people queuing in the streets to go past her coffin. I doubt it myself, though. I think it'll probably be a private, quiet family funeral in Windsor.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, we are getting word, Andrew, that Dodi Al-Fayed is also going to be brought back, his remains, his body, to Great Britain and be buried there. Give us an idea of what people thought of this relationship and how they are feeling about this gentleman who, too, tragically lost his life in this accident last night.
Well, I don't think the British public knew Dodi Fayed particularly well, but of course they did know and had views on his father, not altogether kind ones, as he was quite controversial politically.
Many people thought that the relationship was something that the father had a hand in his attempts to get close to being an official citizen, as well as getting as close to royalty as he could.
Yes, there was an element of that, which of course must be true in that it was on his yacht that the two initially fell for one another.
Yeah. Kimberly, let me bring you back into the discussion as you look at this, and I'm wondering if you feel a sense of finality to a great degree in terms of coming to terms with something that, as you said initially, at first glance, most people suggested when they heard the idea accident, no one immediately thought that there would be a death in this situation, and it's certainly not her.
When I see the pictures of the plane coming in, when I, anticipating the pictures of the coffin, that is, I think, going to hit like a brick. No, there just hasn't been the time. I have watched this woman, I think as we all have, from the moment she appeared from obscurity to the beautiful wedding, through all these trials and successes and failures, and her family. And it is truly like watching a family member, and I think these pictures are going to be wrenching.
Andrew Roberts, let me go back to you and ask you whether or not, in the sense of grief, and all too often we have seen too many young people meet an untimely death, but with the idea that we met and knew this woman at about age 19 and saw her move from what really was a very naive, in some people's minds, young woman, some even say a girl, to a very aspiring woman who clearly was putting her life back together. Is that something else that adds to what we are feeling today?
I think so, certainly. In the year that we've had since her divorce, she was rebuilding her life, and she was looking forward. And I know from personal conversations with her that she thought that she'd actually closed an unhappy chapter on her life, and that things were going to get better.
When you talk about her at this point, and this is one of those things in terms...
When I get allergies, sinus pain's not far behind. My allergist says,
and the beauty will always be there.
We should suggest to you, for those of you who are just joining us, what you are looking at are live pictures coming from North Holt Royal Air Force Base, 20 miles outside of London proper, where the body and remains of Princess Diana have returned from Paris, the site of the tragic accident that took her life. She is returning with her ex-husband, Prince Charles, on the plane, along with two sisters of Princess Diana, bringing the body back home to London. It has been taxiing now for the last couple of moments. It will, of course, come to the stop. What you're seeing now is Prime Minister Tony Blair walking out to meet the plane. We heard from Tony Blair earlier on the death of the princess and what she meant not only to him personally, but to his country and to the world, as we are finding out today when we hear expressions of love and sorrow coming from all points of the world. And it is something that many people are having to come to grips with, as we've been talking about it all day. Oftentimes when something like this happens, particularly when someone has been in the news so recently, so often, it is a face that is so familiar to us all. As Kim said a little earlier, it is almost like a family member has passed on, because you do get a sense of suggesting that even though you do not, you truly believe you know this person. So the grief that is being felt across the world is not surprising. And as you may imagine, this is clearly an incident that has to be played out publicly, but one has to believe, like Andrew Roberts, who knew the princess personally. And Andrew, I'll lay this question in your lap as we continue to look at the plane taxi in. How hard is it to have to share your grief, to share your sorrow in such a public way?
I think, if anything, it helps, actually. It's not as hard as bottling it up. I know that's a very sort of fashionable and modern attitude, but it's definitely the one that comes strongest to mind.
If indeed it is cathartic to a great degree, do you think it cathartic for the family, as we saw them to get right out? We saw them go to church this morning and have a very public outing. Is that something that is one of the things that just comes with the territory, or do you think that that is some type of cathartic notion?
I wonder. Some of them are able to bottle up their emotions with tremendously stiff upper lips, which those of us who aren't related don't need to show. This really is the most terribly moving moment, isn't it? Look.
Indeed, this is something that again starts to become tangible for people as they see the body arrive at North Holt Air Force Base, 20 miles, as we said to you earlier, northwest of London. Jane and Sarah are the two sisters that traveled with Prince Charles to Paris to pick up the body, to bring it home. As we can see the honor guard slowly moving toward the plane, these will be the pallbearers who will remove the body and put it into the transport vehicle. Andrew, do we know, have you heard any idea where the body will go at this point?
Yes, it's being taken to a mortuary in London, and from there we don't know. It will obviously, whatever the arrangements, I think we're going to hear later on tonight or early tomorrow what the funeral arrangements will be. That's Lady Jane
That was the honor guard we saw from the Queen's Color Squadron, and I believe, I cannot see beyond the engine, but I believe those are the sisters who have deplaned. We see the prince emerging. I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
One of the lady on the princess's second to left is Lady Jane Fellows, the sister of Princess Diana and the wife of the Queen's private secretary, Sir Robert Fellows. The other lady is the other sister.
The woman in the black would be Jane. Is that in the black jacket? Okay, so it would be reversed.
Yes.
Okay. And Andrew, do you know where she fell in the line of sisters here in terms of chronologically?
She was the youngest. They will be absolutely crushed by this. They were a happy, fat, and close-knit, the three sisters. They will be crushed by this.
Yeah, indeed. From all indications, a close family. What we see here now is the casket being carefully removed. We'll just listen in and watch. Brother-in-law, Queen's private secretary. No, I'm asking you. Lady Princess Diana's brother-in-law, Queen's private secretary, and the last name is Fellows. And he accompanied them as well? No, I'm saying that he accompanied them too. And we don't know if he's married to Princess Sarah. Give me the honor guard again. What is their official name? time is it there? House of Windsor flag. Correct? The flag is the flag of the House of Windsor. Can you see that? There you have the arrival of Princess Diana to the North Holt Air Force Base, the Royal Air Force Base. We saw the Queen's Color Guard taking the body to the transport vehicle. It is being transported to London. It will take about 20 minutes to reach London proper. As you could see there, they will have a police motorcade as well. taking them into the city. One of the things is that you can see there, Prince Charles is still at the airport greeting those and talking with those. We believe that to be a chaplain in the red, talking with the people that met him at the airport. The two sisters, Sarah and Jane, who accompanied the prince over to Paris to return the body, did depart with the body. And they will be heading into London, where the body is believed to go in preparation for final resting. And that is what we know at this point. We're joined by a couple of people that have covered this situation and also the royals for some time.